Thank you for joining. My name is Mohammad Usman Khan, and today I'm going to present the Alibaba Cloud Deep Dive, the Virtual Private Cloud topic, which is actually part of the ACA exam, right? ACT or 81002 course, right? And what we will discuss in this course is that what is a VPC and how does it work, right? And the plan and design of the VPC called the Virtual Private Cloud, which we will discuss later on in detail about the VPC and the virtual network in Alibaba Cloud. Creating a VPC and a vSwitch, access control in VPC groups, and the VPC connectivity, right? It's including the advanced VPC features, which including the vSwitches, routing, cloud enterprise networks, and the peering, right? And then last but not the least, we will try our best to get some hands-on about the provision of the virtual private cloud. So let's get started. So before moving forward, first we need to understand that what is virtual private cloud. So as for Alibaba and the other cloud provider, the VPC is an isolated private network. If we break the word VPC, it's virtual, private, and cloud, right? Private cloud means those cloud which is isolated with other teams or other clients, right, within the same cloud provider, like in our case in Alibaba, right? Why we call it virtual? Because there is no physical component exist in your cloud console, either in switch, either in routers, either in subnets, and all the components are virtual, which is actually the combination of files and folders. And in the backends, in the Alibaba Cloud data centers, we have some physical components which actually help us to provision a virtual private cloud on our console, right? So VPC groups is actually allow you to specify your own private IP range. Start with the 10 network, 172 network, and 192 networks. These are actually three different private subnets based on three different classes of an IP address. Class A, 10 networks is belong to class A, 172 network belongs to class B, and 192 networks belongs to class C. So normally we use these three type of subnets whenever we provision a virtual private cloud among different subnets, and we can use the network ACL and security group. So what's the difference between network ACL and security groups? Security group is actually help the virtual instances or the ECS, Elastic Compute Service, to secure the ports and only allow those ports which we need. By default, it's implicit deny. No one can enter until you open the port. Network ACL or the net ACL is the stateless. Like if you open anything which you need from inbound to outbound, you need to open outbound to inbound as well, right? And the good thing is that VPC groups are independent from one another. It means if you provision any server from a one VPC, you cannot even call or see that VPC, see that machine in another VPC, either on the same region or either on a different region. That's the beauty of isolation, and that's how virtual private cloud works. Except VPC peering, if you create and set up a VPC peering, you can communicate both machines in different VPCs regardless of the same account or in a different account. Okay, so let's move forward. So if we see the key terms, how and what type of components are actually exist in the VPC. So we have the vRouters called the virtual routers, we have the route tables, and we have the virtual switches called the vSwitches, right? We have the elastic IP and we have the security groups as well. So let's start with the VPC components called the vRouters. So vRouter is actually help to communicate the vSwitches within the VPC, not outside the VPC. If you want to go to the internet, you need to discuss with the vRouter as well, which actually help in the route table and the route, so that if a machine exists in the one vSwitch want to go to the internet, they need to ask with the vRoutes exist in the vRouter to go outside and from which path, right? Elastic IP, also called the elastic public IP network, is actually help to get the fixed IP on that machine which is connected outside the network as well. So we can take easily get RDP access, SSH access, and set up our websites and web applications so that it will be easily connected from outside the VPC as well. That's exists in the public vSwitch or the public subnet. Security group, like I said, security group is actually help to secure vSwitch's machines and to protect from unauthorized access by revoking or providing access, deny or allow in terms of different ports. Like if I want to get access of RDP server in Windows, I need to open the port 3389. If I don't open, definitely I cannot get RDP access. Now in move forward, virtual private cloud is actually a layer 2 isolated network. Why we create a layer 2? Because the switch in the OSI model, open system interconnection, the layer 2 is belongs to the switches and the layer 3 is belongs to the routers. So if we want to communicate between the vSwitches or among the vSwitches, we need to set up a layer 2 isolated network, right, allowing you to build a private network environment to the public cloud. Now if we talk about the region side, as you can see, we can create VPCs on multiple regions. We have a bunch of regions in Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America, Middle East, and now in Saudi as well, along with the Google Cloud, Alibaba Cloud Computing Company, right, SCCC. So we can use it easily on Saudi region as well. So we can create a VPC in Singapore region. Definitely we cannot see the same VPC on another region, but we have an option to create multiple VPCs in multiple regions as per customer requirement without any additional cost, because virtual private cloud is free of cost and you don't need to pay anything except you or until you create a ECS server called the Elastic Compute Server. Okay, let's move forward. So how VPC works? First we need to understand beyond the basics. So VPC actually is a virtual extendable LAN called the VXLAN. It's a tunneling protocol that actually encapsulate layer 2 Ethernet frames in a layer 3 UDP packets, right? So we have the 24-bit tunnel ID which is connected with the UDP and IP and the headers of the MAC address. Okay, so the communication is allowed for the virtual machine with the same tunnel ID only. If we don't have a same tunnel ID, we cannot communicate. Now let's talk about the plan and design of VPC. So if we talk about the planning and designing, we can set up a classless inter-domain routing called a CIDR block. So what is CIDR block? CIDR block is a upper layer IP addressing layer where you actually divide a chunks of subnets for future provisioning. Like in our case, we can create 10.00 network on /8, 10.16.00/20 20 bits, and 192.168.00/16. If let's say if we select the 192.168.00/16 as a CIDR block, we can create a multiple /24 network. Do you know how many subnets can we create in /16? We can create 65535 networks, right? And if we move forward, is the total IP is 65535, and if we divide into multiple subnets, we can create 256 networks, 256 different subnets. Each subnet will have 256 IP. So if we multiply 256 subnet multiply by 256 IP, the result will be 65535, which is actually equivalent to /16. /16 is actually show the number of on bits in 192.168, while the number of off bit is related to the host network. So plan and design our VPC. Select the classless inter-domain routing IP address range suitable for your VPC from the private network as defined with the RFC rule 1918, right? Now let's talk about the vRouters. So a vRouter is actually like a hub in a VPC that connect all subnet in a VPC and also serve as a gateway device that connect the VPC with other networks. So vRouter help to communicate between two subnets, right? Whenever you talk connection within the subnet, you don't need vRouters, but if you go to connect between the subnets and among the subnets, you need a vRouter. Without a vRouter, you cannot communicate the machine that exists between or other subnets within the same VPC. Now vRouter is actually like a hub that connect all subnet in a VPC and also serve a gateway. Why we call serve as a gateway? Because there is a route called 0000/0 which actually help public machines to go outside the network, right, to go to the internet. So that's required a 00 network. Now if we move forwards, plan and design a vSwitch. So vSwitch, unlike vRouter which is layer 3, vSwitch is actually like a layer 2 for the subnet within the group. So vSwitch is actually represent a subnet. So the first and last 3 address of the vSwitch are reserved by a system, and each VPC have maximum of 24 switches, and it cannot span multiple zone. If you create a subnet, it only rely on one zone, not a multiple zone. Now let's talk about the create a VPC and a vSwitch. So VPC and vRouters, we have the VPCs including vSwitches and a ECS of multiple machines, right? And this is actually connected each other. Why? Because the machines are exist as any of the vSwitches, and the vSwitches exist either in one zone, but the whole VPC is exist in multiple zone. How? Because is have multiple vSwitches, each vSwitch in one zone, and in order to make high availability and redundancy, we need to connect vSwitches in multiple zone, and all vSwitches are connected with a vRouter. So we have two type of vRouters. One is the public vRouters and second is the private. So the vRouter is one, but we have two route tables, route table public and route table private, right? And each route table have different routes which actually guide the virtual machines either on a public or on a private to where to go and how to go. Now, so creating VPC and vSwitch is actually connecting the connectivity between vSwitches and a VPC. So now we can see how it create a VPC and vSwitches. So the first step is select a cloud region. In our case, we can create select the Singapore region. After that, we need to create a VPC along with one CIDR block. In that case, the second step, we will not create any vRouter and any vSwitches. So the VPC create a one CIDR block. In our case is 10.0.0.0/8. And in step 3, in the VPC, we will create vSwitches in multiple zone. Let's say we have the subnet CIDR 10.0.0/8. We will create a subnet 10.1.0.0/16 and 10.2.0.0/16 in different zone within the VPC. Now it's creating a VPC and vSwitch. It select Singapore from the region pull down menu, right? Number 1, we need to select the VPC. Step number 2, VPC, create VPC button, put it the name and the default CIDR block or the custom. So what's the difference between? The default CIDR block is provided by the Alibaba Cloud, while the custom CIDR block is provided by yourself. Now in the third step is to create a VPC switch. Now we have created a CIDR block, we have select the region, we have put it the name. So the third step is to set up a vSwitches along with the name and zone in the specific IPv4 CIDR block. Now adding a vSwitches from vSwitch console configure vSwitch with name, zone means availability zone, and the destination CIDR block. These are the steps which we need to set up or provision while creating a vSwitch. So in that case, we can see we have a vSwitch name, zone, and what type of resources we can create. We can create ECS called the Elastic Compute Service, we can create RDS called the Relational Database Service, and we can create the SLB called the Server Load Balancer, right? So the server load balancer always required at least two different IPs, you can say, in order to provide the high availability, right? Or we need a public IP as well. So this is very important if you create a vSwitch, right? So in IPv4 CIDR block is 192.168.0.0/24. It means I can create 252 components in terms of RDS, ECS, and SLB. We have 252 available IPs, and I can create and put it the description why I create this vSwitch. So I can put it in the description, and after that I just click on add button so that I could add more vSwitches apart from this. Now once is done success, we can jump into the another state, right? So we have created a VPC name, vSwitch name, and the third vSwitch, right? So we have one VPC and two different vSwitches. The status is success. It means we have successfully created a VPC along with multi-AZ vSwitches. Now let's move forward, right? So now we have completed the VPC. As you can see, we have the instance ID or name. This instance ID or name can Alibaba understand in terms of technical manner, while the name is actually used for us as a human. We have the CIDR block and the status is available. It means we can use right away. And the default VPC, this is not a default VPC. Default VPC of those VPC which Alibaba provision once you sign up this account on every region. So we have one route table, with two vSwitches. So these two vSwitches are connected with the one route table. So if you want to create a public and private switches separately, you need to set up a two route tables, because each route table have different configuration. Like if you are set up a public route table, the public route table has the internet gateway routes called 000/0, and the private route table have the NAT gateway route, right? So the vSwitches either in public or private should be associated with the right route table. If you select the wrong route table, the routes will not work and the private machines will convert it into public machines, right? And you can, and the last, you can directly manage to, in order to edit something, in order to add some route, in order to provision new vSwitches, anything what you want in the specific VPC. Now let's move towards the access control in the VPC group. Till now we have successfully created a VPC, a network, vSwitches route, and we have understand the importance of the VPC along with the CIDR block. Now the next step which we need to go is the access control in the VPC groups. So access control means the VPC doesn't come with an independent access control. Access control in the VPC relies on the access control capability of each cloud product. For example, we have Elastic Compute Service instance which use security groups so that it allow who can join or who cannot. We have the server load balancer where we use the IP whitelisting concept, and we have the relational database service which also use the whitelist. Whitelist matlab we have to use the whitelisting IPs connected with the RDS, right? Unlike the security group where we allow or deny, in whitelisted we just allow our IPs so that it can directly access unauthorized or for this network. Now let's move forward. Yes, so using cloud products in a VPC, so we have the VPC and the switch. So whenever we create or provision something, this option will come. Which type of VPC you want to select might be possible, or in most of the case we have more than one VPC called the management VPC, production VPC, test VPC. So we have to select which VPC is good for here, and then we will select the vSwitch on the appropriate zone. We have 2 or 3 VPCs. Like in Singapore, we have zone A, separate vSwitch. Singapore zone B, separate vSwitch. So we can easily integrate. Now, if we talk about the VPC connectivity, Alibaba Cloud provide many solutions to connect a VPC to the internet and other VPC or local data centers. So now we can see which type of connections or components we can use in order to communicate services. First, we have SLB, called the server load balancer, which actually help to put the server behind the server load balancer so that no one can directly access to this machine. Second, the beauty of the SLB is the scaling. If you set up the scaling, horizontal scaling, you need SLB so that whenever you increase the machine by adding any load, it will automatically add behind the SLB as a backend instance, right? Second is we have EIP, called the elastic IP. Elastic IP is actually the fixed IP which actually help servers to communicate outside the network. Not only that, but also if you stop and start the machine, the IP will not change, unlike those IP which is provided by Alibaba itself, right? And the third is the NAT gateway. Right? And in the NAT gateway, we use NAT gateway whenever the traffic only goes outside, not inside. So NAT gateway is good for those machines which is actually behind the firewall and no one can access directly except the bastion host. And then NAT gateway is just for traffic from inside to outside, just get some network updates, server updates, Linux update, and so on. This is for good for those machines which is actually behind the load balancer or behind the firewall. Fourth is the Express Connect. Express Connect we normally use for the dedicated fiber or the VLANs. And the fifth is VPN, called the virtual private cloud, which is normally we use for the site-to-site VPN or the virtual circuit where Express Connect is not available. Sixth is the CN, Cloud Enterprise Network, where we can connect multiple VPCs, VPN, Express Connect on the same time, right? And we have the SAG or the server access group, right? So these are the options which we can use easily. Now, if you want to connect to the internet, now we have to understand that which service for what uses. Now, if we see, if we connect to the VPC to the internet, what we need to do is, when the cloud provider and a VPC need to communicate with the internet, we can use SLB, Elastic IP, and NAT gateway. These are the services which actually help our RDS, our SLB, and our machines to connect with the internet. Another thing, VPN connection to other VPCs to off cloud system. Now these services are actually communicating with each other, trying to communicate multiple VPCs and multiple networks, either on-premises network, other cloud network, hybrid network, or the multiple VPCs on multiple regions or the same regions to communicate with each other. Start with the Express Connect. Express Connect is actually help to communicate services with the dedicated lease line. If you want to connect your office with the Alibaba Cloud with the dedicated fiber, you can use Express Connect. We have VPN option. Most of the time we in specific regions where the Express Connect doesn't exist, right? So we can jump on the VPN called the site-to-site VPN, where we set up the IPsec VPN tunnels either on the hybrid infrastructure or other cloud infrastructure like AWS, Google, and Azure Cloud. Third one is the CN, called the Cloud Enterprise Network, where we can communicate all the connectivity either in Express Connect, VPN Connect, different VPCs, right? So communicate easily in one go. Is you can say is the mesh topology under CN. And last we have the SAG, secure server access group. Now let's talk about some advanced VPC features. So in Alibaba Cloud, VPC supports several features for advanced user. We have network ACL options, we have custom route table options, and we have DSCP option set. So let's discuss one by one. In the network ACL options, this is normally used for the access control list for the stateless security. Static security means if you want to inbound something, add, you can add. If you want to add anything related to outbound, you can add. Now we have the custom route tables as well. In the custom route tables, what we can do is, in the custom route table, we can create our custom route especially for the public network. Why we call a custom route table? Because is beyond what Alibaba suggests or Alibaba work. In the custom route table, we can add our VPN routes, Express Connect routes, CEN routes, and our different other routes for the hybrid networking. And the DSCP option set is the option which help our machines like ECS or RDS to provide automatic private IP assigning. We can change the DSCP option set whenever we want by adding our DSCP options. Okay. So what is network ACL? Network ACL I already explained to you, so we can move forward, but I would like to show this diagram. As you can see, outbound rule match, no outbound rule match. This is what actually ACL work. And if you see the inbound rule matches here, while the network ACLs and inbound rule matches here, while some rules are not matched, so the traffic from outside to inside is not allowed. The good thing is network ACL apply on the whole subnet, while the security group allow only for the specific virtual machine, in our case called the ECS, Elastic Compute Service. That's the difference between ACL, network ACL, and the security group. Now if we move forward, as you can see, we can create network ACL rules like policy, allow or block, which protocols like ICMP, Internet Control Messaging Protocol, GRE tunnels, TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, or the user datagram protocol, right? We have the source CIDR block available where we can allow or deny the traffic. We have destination. The source port range might be possible, we have more than one port, so we can use that, and the destination ports. As you can see, the use cases, the development vSwitch, production vSwitch. So between development vSwitch to production vSwitch are crossed, but development vSwitch via test vSwitch are allowed. So this is how it's work. Okay, so why not just security groups? Why we are using the network ACL instead we have the security groups? So there is a difference. I already told you, but we can explain the detail. In the network ACLs, we can apply to vSwitches, and in the security group we can apply to ECS instances only in the VPC level. In the stateless level, you must set explicit rules for both inbound and outbound traffic, and the stateful we can rules apply by default for both inbound and outbound traffic. In the network ACL, the system attempts to match requests with rules in descending orders for priority, and in the security group, the system match a request against all rules before the rule apply. There is a basic difference. And in last but not the least, each vSwitches can be associated with only one ACL, and each instance can be added to more than one security group. It means we can create and add one security group to multiple instances, and one instance can be used for multiple security group. Like we have HTTP separate security group, for web access we have separate security group, and we have RDS access, we have separate access group available here, right? So we have VPC, vSwitches, and the route table available. As you can see, we have the destination CIDR blocks available, 00, next hop is ECS instance, and next hop is ECS 01, right? So these are two vSwitches. If you want to communicate with each other, the vRoute directly communicate and allow to go to the another machines, just routing, reading the route table and nothing else. I hope you enjoy my session. This is all about the VPC. So see you in the next lecture. Thank you.